everybody, and welcome to Mr. Mike's World, starring Mr. Mike as the Emperor and Dustin Hoffman as the Vice Emperor. So in Chapter 7, we are talking about the ancient Israelites. And let's start off with the early Hebrew Israel. In 2000 and 1500 BC, the Hebrews started a religion called Judaism, which is just the Hebrews' religion. They wrote things down, and this became the Hebrew Bible. Now, the Hebrew Bible talks about a man named Abraham. So God told Abraham to leave his home in Mesopotamia and go to a new land. And so he moved to a land that at the time was called Canaan, and today it is called Palestine or Israel. And so many of them moved to Egypt, and eventually the Pharaoh in Egypt made them slaves. But then a man named Moses led the people on an exodus, which is a journey out of Egypt. According to the Hebrew Bible, God sent down a bunch of bad plagues on Egypt, and the Pharaoh finally let them go. Now, the Israelites really believed that God saved them because he loved them. And so a lot of people throughout history, ever since then, they've looked to this story of the ancient Israelites and basically said, you know what, if God loved them so much that he saved them, I think he loves me enough to save me as well. While they were in the desert, Moses went up on a mountain, and the Hebrew Bible says that God wrote down for him the 10 Commandments, which is a code of moral laws given to the Israelites. This made them promise to worship only God, and it changed all of their lives. They wandered in the desert for about 40 years, and then they went and conquered much of Canaan, modern-day Palestine, with their army. They split up the land and lived in small villages until eventually they all joined under one king. Now, we talk about these kings in class, so if you want, you could skim it now on pages 206 to 207. But here are some major important things that you should know. First, Saul was the first king, then it was David, and then it was Solomon. Second thing you should know is that in around 530 BC, the Jews experienced the diaspora, which is the scattering of the Jews outside of Canaan. So they had to leave Canaan and go to other places. Now, Jews base everything in their society around religion. This is why every festival they have is something to do with religion. And they also rest on Friday because God rested on Friday when he created the earth. Now, the Jews believe in monotheism. Monotheism is the belief that there is only one God. And Jews believe that Judaism was the first monotheistic religion. Jews believed they were God's chosen people. They also strongly believed that they needed to teach their religion to their children. And so their holy books talk about justice and righteousness. And according to the Torah, justice means kindness and fairness to everybody. And righteousness means just doing the right thing always. Many Jews still follow all of these laws, and they are called Orthodox Jews. There are many Jews who choose not to follow most of these laws, and they're called Reform Jews. And then there are the people who are kind of in between, and these are called the Conservative Jews. The Conservative Jews are kind of in the middle. Now, the Jews have a few different books that they consider holy. First, there is the Torah. The Torah is the most sacred text of Judaism. They study these texts in the synagogue, which is a Jewish house of worship. The Torah is the most important book. It has the laws to follow, and it has a history of the Jews until the death of Moses. The Torah is only part of the Hebrew Bible, which is also called the Tanakh. The second part of the book, it describes the prophets. And prophets are people who are said to receive messages from God so that they can teach them to others. Now, the final part of the Hebrew Bible has the history of the Hebrew people, the poetry, songs, and wisdom sayings. Outside of the Torah and the Hebrew Bible, there is what's called the Talmud. The Talmud is just a bunch of commentaries and stories on the Torah. The writings of the Talmud were made between 200 and 600 AD, and it was written because some of the laws were hard to understand, and so some rabbis explained what they meant. In 1947, some young boys found this small cave, and in the cave were the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are writings by Jews who lived about 2,000 years ago. And this helped a lot of people understand a lot better how Jews lived about 2,000 years ago. Now, the ideas of Judaism have spread all over the place. They went into Western civilization, they influenced both Christianity and Islam, and many people still look to the Ten Commandments as words that everybody should live by. And also, many people still decide to take one day of the week off and not work. So now we are in section 3, and we're talking about Judaism over the centuries. And before 100 AD, the Jews were under the rule of Romans, and so they wanted to gain independence from the Romans. So there was a group of people called the Zealots, and the Zealots were the most rebellious group of Jews during this time who believed that, you know what, they shouldn't answer to the Romans. The only person they should answer to is God. So these zealots disobeyed Roman officials and they started a war. And this war lasted 4 years. And the Jews lost and it left Jerusalem completely destroyed. And most important to the Jews was that their temple, where the Dome of the Rock stands today, was completely destroyed. Some of these zealots continued to fight, and they locked themselves in Masada, which is right next to the Dead Sea. And the Romans sent 15,000 soldiers to go kill them. And the story goes was that when the soldiers finally broke into Masada, all the Jews had killed themselves so that they would not become slaves to the Romans. Now, because of this war, the Romans decided, you know what, we need to punish these Jews living in Jerusalem. And so they killed most of them. And the ones who were still alive decided that they needed to move to places like Egypt. About 60 years later, in 130 AD, some Jews decided to start the war against the Romans again. And again, they lost. And when they did this, the Romans just kicked every Jew out of Jerusalem, and so they were all gone from Jerusalem. This time, rabbis became the leaders of Judaism, and rabbis are simply Jewish religious teachers. Now, for the most part in history, wherever the Jews have gone, they've been treated badly, and so they've gone through a lot of hard times throughout the thousands of years. Now, we will cover pages 217 to 219 in your book during class. So if you want, you can skim over it right now. So that is all that we have for today. I hope you have learned a lot, and I hope you are able to use this to do well on your test. I'll see you in class. God bless.